Good to be here. God bless you. Can you hear me out there? Green's on? Green's on. I just want to express appreciation for the invite to be here. I appreciate Pastor Mike and Josie and friends for a number of years, and Mike and I have had some adventures in Africa, and I've got a short video clip of him on my iPhone that I'd be willing to show you after the service this morning. It's for like maybe $10 a pop. I'll show you all joking aside, it is really good to be here and to be amongst friends. I've found that my preaching is autobiographical, which is just one way of saying it just means something to me personally. And today is very, very true of that. I was thinking and praying about the theme, Open Doors, and it occurred to me that the doors that God has opened for me over the years, friends were often a very big part of those open doors. And so I'm going to talk about open doors and friends. And two of my lifelong friends are here today, Ron Simpkins and Joe Weidinger. We have been friends for 43 years. And so I've known them since I was like in kindergarten. But they were both there the night that I got saved, 43 years ago. And it was actually Ron Simpkins that prayed the sinner's prayer with me. And I've always said I know of at least one prayer that Ron has prayed that was answered, because I'm still saved to this day. A couple of months after I gave my life to Christ, our church in Flagstaff, it was called Victory Chapel, and we were part of a huge nationwide mass evangelism event called the I Found It campaign. This was back in 1975, and some of you seasoned saints may remember it. It was, there were bumper stickers, there were posters, there were billboards, newspaper, radio, TV ads, and it went on for several weeks. And all it said was, I found it, with a big exclamation mark. And so it was to get people's curiosity going and try to figure out what it was. I found it, you know. And so at the end of the campaign, the idea was to get a bunch of teams together all over the nation and telephone people's homes. And we split up the phone book in our city in Flagstaff and had a number of teams in our church. And so Ron Simpkins, Joe Weidinger, and I were on one of the teams. They had been saved for a little over a year, and I was a brand new convert. And so I kind of took their lead, which was a big mistake. They handed me a name to call up, and I didn't know at all that they were completely setting me up with this guy. And so I telephone, and I'm nervous, I'm a new convert, and so when we called them, the Campus Crusade for Christ had laid a script out for us of questions we were to ask. You know, have you noticed the ads? I found it. And then you were to go down all these questions to ask them with the goal of ending up getting them saved at the end. Well, so I telephoned the guy that Ron and Joe gave me the name of, and so as I'm listening for the answer, he answers the phone and says, "Hello, this is Father Milligan." Father Milligan. And then I knew, because Ron and Joe weren't calling anybody. They were watching me and laughing. And so they're howling and over there. And so now I know I've been set up. And so I'm kind of a little rattled and went Father Milligan. And so I paused for a moment and I said, "Mr. Milligan." And then began to go through the script, you know, and ask questions. I don't remember his response to all of my questions, but I do remember. See, they knew him because they'd had both of them had run-ins with Father Milligan. He was an alcoholic priest. And I think when I called him, he had been, and so after I started launching into my questions, he got really mad. And I may have gone a little off script. And I believe there was some cussing on his part, but there was Ron and Joe were just howling. And so when I got through the thing, got finished with a phone call, I told you our church was named Victory Chapel, and I realized that what this was just part one of Victory Chapel hazing. Couple of months later, again, I've only been saved for several months. The pastor of our church invites me to go to my first Bible conference in July in Prescott, Arizona. Man, I am so excited. I'm a brand new believer. I'm going to a Bible conference. It's going to be preaching all week long. It's going to be awesome. Maybe I'll get a clue about what God's going to do in my life. I'm so excited. So it's Monday morning. I'm all packed, ready to go. I'm just beside myself with excitement, and I get a telephone call before I left, and this phone call, so I answer the phone and I said hello, and this voice on the other end of the phone sounds very serious and officious, and it says, is this Alex Wilson? And I said, well, yeah, and he says, well, this is a selected service, and we're just calling to let you know you've been drafted. I'm telling you, my heart hit the floor. I'm almost hyperventilating. My mind is racing. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, because this is back in 1975. Vietnam conflict had been a very real thing. And so, and now, instead of going to the Bible conference, I've been drafted. They're going to shave my head and everything. Back in those days, I had a nice head of hair down to here. And then through the fog of my thoughts, reason prevailed, and it occurred to me, Vietnam's over. And there is no draft. And so I go, who is this? And there's that distinctive cackle on the other end of the line, Ron Simpkins. Victory Chapel hazing part 2. When I got saved, I was a young, gullible, pure new convert. Pure might be a little stretch, but I guess you could say really a lot of the cunning that I have developed over the years and most of my survival techniques were honed by my friends Ron Simpkins and Joe Whiting. But all joking aside, as I think about the doors that God has opened to me over the years, I realize something, and this is very true, very real to me, and that is those doors that God has opened have more than often been held by the hands of friends like Ron and Joe. It's highly doubtful that I would have made it in ministry without them. Joe and Becky pioneered the first church that I pastored in Winslow. They had been there for 2.5 years and brought a great group of people together. Now looking back, it is an absolute miracle that any of those people stayed. When Joe and Becky left and I came, I was young, I was inexperienced, I was really stupid. I was sincere, but I tell you, I made a lot of mistakes. I'll tell you, one time we needed money. You know how it is when you're pastoring and trying to get things going, and man, we had bills to pay, and my gosh, we needed money. So people needed to tithe. And so I had developed a sermon on tithing out of Malachi chapter 3. Get them. We're going to get some tithes. So I preached this message on what a man robbed God. And so I had crafted this illustration for on robbing God. Why? Of course, we would never rob. And I just began to go off on this illustration. I said, you know what? It makes more sense to rob a Circle K than it does to rob God. I said, it makes more sense to walk into a Circle K, stick a gun in the guy's face, clear out the cash drawer, and rob a Circle K than it does to rob God. I was feeling pretty anointed, you know, than it does to rob God. The next weekend, I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico to preach for Larry Huck, who was pioneering there. And I get a phone call from our head disciple, Ray Kirkland had gotten saved with Joe and Becky there, and I got a phone call from Ray Kirkland. This is a week after that message, and so I talked to Ray, and I say, hey, what's going on? He goes, oh, Pastor, we got a little problem. I said, what? He said, Joe Padilla robbed a Circle K. Straight up. My mind flashes back. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And he goes, yeah, and he says, it's pretty serious. And I said, well, yeah. He says, and when they arrested him, he had our tithe envelopes in his pocket. And he said he was going to tithe off of what he robbed to our church. I'm not making this up. You can't make this kind of stuff up. And I go, well, I'll be back Monday. And so, long story short on that, you know, the cops knew this guy wasn't right in the head, and I didn't get in trouble, and miracle of miracles, he got off with probation because of some technicality and all that. But anyway, back in those early days, I was so inexperienced, so young, so green, made lots of mistakes, and it's much to the credit of Joe and Becky, of the people that they built, that they stayed with us, and not only that, but we even grew some. Nice. I struggled a lot in early ministry. Now I'm fairly comfortable preaching now. I had better be comfortable, more comfortable these days. It's been, 39 years I've been preaching. Hopefully I've gotten a little more comfortable. But in those early days, early years, I was not what you would at all. Sometimes I'd feel good, you know. I think it was just the amount of coffee I drank or something. But then there were other times I really wrestled and struggled, and Ron was my lifeline back in those early days. He had already been out and had been pastoring and pioneering for a couple of years, and so we talked on the phone for hours, and usually our conversation started with something like this. All right, Wilson, take the gun away from your head slowly. And it wasn't quite that bad, but seriously, I doubt that I would have made it pastoring without Ron's help and friendship. My whole point, excuse me, today in preaching this is that you and I need each other. None of us will be able to walk through all the doors God opens for us without the help of our friends. Even as great as the Apostle Paul was, it's clear from his writings how much he depended on the friendship and help of others. In Colossians 4, verse 3, he says, meanwhile, praying also for us that God would open to us a door for the word. And so Paul was talking to friends of his and saying, I'm depending on your prayers opening up doors for me. Paul recognized his need of friends and relationships. His letters are full of the names of his friends and relationships that he had. If you've ever written, I'm sure you've read through Romans chapter 16. And throughout the chapter, Paul begins to talk about friends that he has that he wants to call attention to. He speaks of Phoebe. He says, was a helper of many, and myself also. Priscilla and Aquila, his fellow helpers in Christ. And then just a whole slew of other unpronounceable names in Romans 16 that I'm not even going to try to speak today. But you can read them in Romans 16, and it was obvious that it was important not only to Paul, but to the Holy Spirit to include them in the Word of God, because friendship and relationship is so important. Paul also wrote about the heartbreak he felt from lost friendships. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 10 and 11, he says, for Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world. Only Luke is with me, and get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for ministry. And so these verses show Paul's pain in Demas's betrayal, but also his dependence on friends like Luke and Mark and Timothy. Paul was a man who felt things deeply. You ever read through the Bible and you come across a verse that you may have read 1,000 times, but all of a sudden it just stops you? This next verse is one of those that hit me, and it's 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15. Paul's writing, he says, this you know, that all those in Asia have turned away from me. Now, I've been hurt when people in churches that I've pastored have left, or I've lost friends that I thought would be there forever. I've been hurt. You've been hurt. Tell somebody, I've been hurt. But you know, I was thinking about that, and Paul says, all of Asia has forsaken me. At least we've never had a whole continent leave. A whole continent. Oh, I know I have kind of a twisted mind sometimes, but it struck me, I had to laugh. All of Asia. I get upset if a couple of people leave my church. A whole stinking continent left. But listen, in spite of the hurt and the pain that he experienced, he also understood that he couldn't do ministry or the Christian life alone. And he didn't want to. Paul knew that much of his happiness and success in life and ministry was dependent on his friends. If you read through his writings, he talks about and uses terms like brothers, sister, family, friends, fellow helpers, yoke fellows, partners, and on and on. You know, today our relationship with God is very personal, isn't it? Just this morning I was touched again when talking about getting saved and what that means. You know, nobody but we ourselves and God fully knows all that he did when we got saved. Even those closest to us, our wives or husbands or closest friends, will never know the depth of what God has done in our lives when he saved us. Isn't that true? Amen. We can tell our testimony, we can share things, but no one will fully know the impact of what Jesus has made on our hearts but us and God. Our relationship with God is very, very personal. but it is not at all private. We need each other. And the doors that God opens for us are almost always held by the hands of our friends. And this has been especially true with me and what I experienced in Africa. When I first moved to Kenya, I went to a city called Nakuru to pioneer a church there. And it was Brian Yeager that helped me incredibly during that move. Brian did all the legwork on getting my paperwork done for the TEP, the temporary employment permit, so I could function as a missionary there. And then once I got into Kenya, I went to Brian's church in the tent in Nairobi and saw just incredible move of what God was doing there. And so I just copied what Brian was doing in Nairobi in Nakuru. We opened our church with an open-air crusade, and Brian came and preached that crusade. He brought a whole team from the church in Nairobi. Philemon Wachara was Brian's right-hand man in those days and led worship, and that we struck up a friendship that, and this has been 30-some-odd years now that we've had this friendship. They came with this team. They built the platform. They set up the sound. Brian preached the crusade. Philemon interpreted. We had hundreds of people get saved and launched the church and that church grew and did it. We had an incredible move of God. And I know that God called me there into Nakuru. But I also understand something very important, and that is that what God did there wasn't just because of God's man of faith and power for the hour, namely me, but it was because I did respond to the call of God there, but I had a whole lot of help from my friends. Amen. Brian and Philemon. Philemon, just several years later, would pioneer a church under a tree in Nairobi, and gathered a group of people together under a tree in Nairobi, and that work today numbers over 2,000 people. They're not under the tree anymore. They got a beautiful facility and a thriving congregation of 2,000 people plus, and it's just incredible to see what God can do if we'll just give Him half a chance, and with a little help of our friends. Several years later after that, I went to Malawi as a missionary, and it was a total miracle I was able to go. We didn't have the support base that we were used to having before this because relationships had changed. But Larry and Janet Neville and Mike and Donna Neville helped me. And that's putting it mildly. They undergirded me, along with Ron Jones, Ron Simpkins, Joe Weidinger, Howard Pennington, and a number of others. And I know what Paul meant when he wrote to the Philippians in Philippians 4:16, where he says, "You sent aid once and again for my necessities." Such a miracle that I was able to go during the climate of those days when I went, and the lack of seeming support that would be there. But I was able to go, and God did a tremendous work there. And you know why? Because I had a lot of help from friends. I worked primarily with two national pastors, Alex Trevaro and Charles Antunya, and they were just pastoring little village churches in those days, and all they needed was somebody to come and kind of give them a little encouragement and a little instruction, and they've now grown in, and this is some years, 20 years later, they've grown into national and international leaders, and between the two of them, they now oversee some 300 to 350 churches in Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Tanzania, and Lesotho. While I was living in Malawi, Sydney Idle and Debbie Grego came on a team and visited us while we were there in Malawi, and they also traveled into Rwanda. Sydney met Charles Antunya during that trip, And it wasn't too long after that Jan and Sydney, along with Albert and Yvonne Contreras, began the Hearts for the World ministry. They undergirded and have been for a number of years now, Charles and Tunya in Malawi, and are also responsible for the oversight and care of ministry in Malawi, Rwanda, Kenya, and now Uganda. Now, my point in saying all this is that we need each other. And together with God, we can do the impossible. Amen. Amen. A couple of years ago, Ron Simpkins, Mike Nestus, and I were with Coney and Lani Orozco in Kenya. And some years ago, they founded Missions for Orphans in Kitale, Kenya, and have built churches and cared for orphans and widows, and have made impact in areas where other missionaries would fear to tread. Coney, you're all that and a bag of chips. The man has no fear. And but I can tell you that after the investment that Coney and Lani have made, a huge personal investment out of their own pocket and their life and their time. But I'm telling you, I know that they would tell you today that they would have never been able to make the impact that they've made without the help of so many others. Amen. We need each other. That's right. And the doors that God opens for us are almost always held by the hands of our friends. Close friendships, like close marriages, don't just happen. How many know that's true? It takes commitment. It takes work. And it takes something more. I thought about going off into that, but really what I want to just touch on just briefly in this, and how to have close relationships, close friendships, is that really what we need is we need to recognize and value their importance. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 17, it says some simple instruction here, and it says, love the brotherhood. Love the brotherhood. Now, again, as our sister yesterday was preaching and talking about sons of God, this is not talking about gender. And when he's talking about loving the brotherhood, it's not just talking about a guy's club or something like that. Loving the brotherhood, what it's talking about is appreciating, valuing, loving the bond that we as believers have through Jesus, and the bond that we have together. That's right. Love the brotherhood. Now, how many know that can be challenging? Because we're all so different. Now look at somebody and tell them, you're different. As a side note, I just thought I'd throw this in. Somebody said, before you criticize someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes. That way, when you criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. Probably not the best advice, but we are all different. And in spite of our differences, we need each other. Our ethnicities, our backgrounds, our experiences, what we've all gone through, are all so different. Those of us who are pastors and in ministry, we've gone through some things, haven't we?
Amen.
Some things that we've gone through have been really good. There are some things that we've go through that have not been so good. Read through the Bible, Paul talks about perils. You almost have to read that chapter where he talks about perils with a southern accent. Perils. Perils. Anybody besides me been through some perils? Somebody say perils. Perils. You have to work on that southern accent a little bit. But that was good. We have to be careful in the midst of our life and through our experiences and heartache and the pain that we go through. We have to be careful not to forget how much we need each other. I've always appreciated that in addition to saving me and the family that God's given me and calling me to preach, that God's given me some really good friends.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesus.
And I don't know that I've always done the best job at expressing how much I appreciate them, but I know that my life is so much richer because of them. I have been so looking forward to this conference and being here. I've enjoyed the ministry. I appreciated Pastor Omar's preaching last night, especially the word he gave me. I was prepared with an American Express card on my forehead last night, and I didn't even have to use it. He gave me a word anyway. But I've looked forward to coming to this conference and to the ministry, but in addition to all of that, just getting together with friends. You know, I have a friend who used to live in Kingman, where I live, and pastor now. He's here with us, John Neal. He drove 2.5 hours from Wyoming to be here with us today, just because he's my friend.
Yes.
And that means something. These conferences have always, going back to that first conference and Ron Simpkins' phone call and all that, I did go to the conference. I did enjoy it. I have over the years gone to, gosh, I don't even know, 43 years, how many Bible conferences I've been in, pastor Bible conferences I've been in. I heard sermon after sermon, and I appreciate, I've enjoyed the well, I can't say that I've enjoyed all the conferences I've been to, but almost all of the conferences that I've been to over the years. There's some of them, and you have to, back in the day, there were some conferences we just went to and we were just bludgeoned all week and then left broke because they bled us dry, And so this type of conference is so enjoy. Enjoy the ministry, the positive, upbuilding preaching and edification, as the Bible says, right? Yeah. But beyond all of the preaching and all of that, what I most enjoy about times like this is being able to come and share and get together with friends.
Yeah, that's right. Amen.
And I have, since I've been here, we've told old stories, we've laughed a lot, and I've also shed some tears while I was here, and that's all involved. And it's so important for us to recognize our need of each other. Our brotherhood, our togetherness is what makes us great. None of us will be able to accomplish all that God wants us to do without each other. Now, there's a quote that's attributed to Ben Franklin after signing the Declaration of Independence that rings true. And it goes like this: "Brethren, we had better hang together in this, or assuredly we will hang separately." And they went on to build a great nation, didn't they? Our togetherness is what makes us great. Now, I've always known that I am not all that. And this is not false modesty or me just trying to be humble. It's just reality. I have always understood that I am just not all that, The great scholar, Dirty Harry, said these words: "A man has to know his limitations."
Come on.
And I've got a lot of limitations. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've walked through, God has walked me through a crisis or two. But I also know that God has helped me over the years. He has been so good to me. And He has opened doors of opportunity for me that I could only have imagined, that I did imagine as a young convert. And I've lived through some of those days. It's, you know, what an incredible life with God. But I also understand and know that the doors that God has allowed me to walk through have been held open by the hands of my friends. 20 years ago, in 1998, Pastor Omar was talking about his time in 1998, and it struck me. It was the same year that I was in a crisis time in my life. 1998, man, I don't know what was up with that year. Bad juju. But I was suffering. I was hurting. And a friend named Howard Pennington called me on the phone and asked me to come on staff in Kingman. And I was all busted up inside and really didn't know if I even had it in me to preach anymore. I didn't know if I could do it. Just didn't know. And so I told Howard, I said, man, I appreciate your friendship. Howard's been such a good friend. I said, I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the offer. And I said, would you, is it all right if I just pray about it for a while? And he said, well, of course. And then I got off the phone and called another friend, Ron Simpkins. And I told Ron, I said, well, you know, Howard called and made me this offer to come on staff in Kingman. And I said, man, I really don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off. And man, I don't even know whether I can. Ron, I just don't know if I can do it. And you know what Ron told me? He said, you know what? He said, you're an idiot if you don't get off this phone and call Howard right back and tell him that you're coming. I got off the phone and I thought, well, I don't want to be an idiot.
Come on.
Now listen, because this is really important. At that time, I was so hurt. I was so busted up inside. The thought of me moving and moving the kids with me, cross country and that, it seemed like such a monumental risk. And I did pray about it. And it was hard for me, at that time, it was hard for me to hear from God by myself.
Come on.
And I know it shouldn't be that way. I know it's not supposed to, and I have heard from God over the years praying by myself, but I'm just telling you the way it was. At that time, it shouldn't have been that way, but it was that way for me. But I'll tell you, I heard from God through the mouth of a friend.
Yes.
And I just off that word from Ron saying, what are you, idiot? I called Howard back, said I'd love to come. Made that move. Just, kind of like Abraham of old, went out not knowing. Didn't know what would happen. And that was in June. That will be 20
Wow.
years.
Hallelujah.
I've been pastoring there. I've had the opportunity to take numerous trips back and forth to Africa. We have seen that church grow and flourish. People getting saved. My life, yeah. I'm not painfully hurting and broken today. Hallelujah. Man. God has been so good. He is so good. He's good to us. Say, God's good to me. But I think I heard the name. There he is. Is Ron back there? Where's Ron? I hear him. Thank you, Ron, for being my friend. Thank you for being my friend. We need each other. And none of us will be able to fulfill all that God has for us without our friends.
That's right.
These friendships are always challenging. They have to be valued. They have to be worked for. They need to be loved. Love the brotherhood. But I want to tell you something that you really already know. They are worth, these relationships are worth the investment. Open doors are almost always held by the hands of our friends.
Amen.
God bless you. God love you. I'm going to turn it over to Michael.